Good morning, and welcome to Backyard and Beyond. And welcome to you, Nancy Degner.
From Central Iowa.
Yes.
Where it's sunshiny.
Yes, sun is shining here, too. You know, we all have to comment on that because we haven't seen very much of that, it seems like.
That's for sure.
Yes. Well, of course, Beef Month, you know, we could talk about beef forever because there's so many things to talk about. But Beef Month is when we want to kind of zero in on that. And Nancy, two things that I want to visit about. One is about lean cuts and the other about ways to boost flavor. And I know we'll run out of time, but let's talk about the lean cuts. You know, a couple of years ago, you introduced me to beef tenders. It's become my favorite cut, and it is lean.
That's correct. And the beef, we call it the beef shoulder tender, the beef petite tender. Different stores tend to put a little different label on it, but it is a muscle that used to be part of what most of us have eaten in the past as a pot roast. And the beef industry, through the beef checkoff, funded some significant research at two major universities, Florida and Nebraska, to take apart the muscles in both the chuck and the round, because there are like 35 different muscles within that whole shoulder section of the beef carcass. And when they took these cuts apart, they found two things. One of the things they found is that some of those muscles in there are tender enough that we can grill them as steak, and we know America loves steak. So we found some new grillable cuts. And number two, we found when we separated those muscles and took them apart and trimmed off what we call the seam fat, or the fat between those different muscles, we ended up with lean cuts of beef.
So some of those 29 in the list, there are some other cuts from that shoulder area that would be on that list also.
That's correct. We started out with 7, and I believe then we went to 12, and then we went to 19, and we now we identify 29 cuts of beef that meet the government's definition for lean. And as we continue to do this work that we talked about, the research on the different muscles, we actually have more than 29, but some of the cuts from the round are very, very lean also.
All right. So where do we find out more information about that? I mean, obviously the beef industry is trying to let everybody know about this. Are there a couple of places where we might kind of keep up to date on what those research results are and what the lean cuts are?
That's right. For specifically looking at nutrition information and probably the research behind our recommendation that beef is a great part of a healthy diet, I would say go to beefnutrition.org. It's just beefnutrition.org. And that actually is our site for what I would call health professionals or people with a little, it's not a recipe site. It's more of, here are fact sheets, here's information on what the lean cuts are, here's information on how you include them in a heart healthy diet, here's some research background. So if you're really serious about the whys and the science behind some of our information, I would go to beefnutrition.org. Now, if you just want to have fun and you want to cook beef, and you can certainly learn about our lean cuts and how to cook them, then I would send you to beefitswhatsfordinner.org.
Okay.
And that's a long one, but it's just beefitswhatsfordinner.org.
And I'm sure you're still putting out some brochures, some recipe brochures?
That's right. We also, if anyone wants the printed copy, we still have those. You can contact us. You can either email us at beef@iabeef.org, or you can call us 515-296-2305.
Okay.
515-296-2305. You can also write us, but I don't think we get hardly any requests via writing anymore, via the mail.
Well, and if somebody does, I have that information here. They can get a hold of me. Now, let's talk about, some people say, well, you know, when you take away the fat, you have these lean cuts, you're taking away a lot of the flavor. But if that's true, and not everybody would agree with that, there are many ways to boost the flavor that's already there.
That's right. And I would agree that that's what some people feel, and that's how their taste preferences are. Some people really prefer the very, very lean. And as long as you know how to cook them appropriately, the worst thing that consumers do, that cooks do, to harm the taste or flavor of beef is to overcook it. Mm-hmm. I don't care what grade of beef or what cut. If you overcook it, because it is so high in protein, that protein at a certain point it will toughen. And so if you're careful when you're cooking, you can make any cut, whether it's lean or it has a little more fat there, to be tender and juicy. When it has more marbling, that fat acts to almost protect it. It makes it easier to chew because the muscle fibers just kind of slide by each other. When it is very, very lean, then if you overcook it, there's so much moisture in it or a higher water content that water evaporates, and then it toughens and dries, and there's no return from that if you overcook it.
Nancy, I don't know if there's any research related to this, but, when I was growing up, I think nearly everybody probably overcooked, and they certainly cooked it to well done. And that's all been changing as we've learned more about cooking and the safety and all those kinds of things.
That's right. And so we do know that the flavor that's most appreciated by most people is probably that medium degree of doneness. And I know people who will not eat it unless it's absolutely gray.
Yes.
And so we're happy to have people like all different kinds of beef, whatever doneness it is. But the other thing that we also work through USDA in terms of food safety information. So we go by their definitions and their recommendations. And they say 145 degrees internal temperature is safe for any cut of beef. And so that's really a medium rare. And that's what we recommend. You can, with that, only exception there is ground beef, and we want ground beef at 160.
And most, if you have a meat thermometer, which is a good thing for everybody to have in their kitchen, most of them state that on there. You don't have to go look it up if you don't remember it. It's right there in front of you. So
that's right.
Good thing to have.
I've kind of given up convincing people that they need to have a meat thermometer for safety. We all think we're in control of our destiny, whether we are or not. But what I can tell you is that if you use that meat thermometer, it will help you not overcook the beef, because you don't have to have a hockey puck when it comes to a hamburger. And we recommend for those steaks, to get the maximum flavor, to take them off about 5 degrees before that desired doneness, and then let them rest for a few minutes. And that allows the juices to kind of resettle and stay within the meat instead of running out on the plate when you slice it.
Okay, good advice. Well, let's move on to the rubs, marinades, drizzles. What's the difference in all of those?
Well, if you're like my husband, and I know that there's a significant number of people out there who say, why would you do anything to the great taste of beef?
I think my husband's like that too.
Okay, so moving on from them, we just give it to them plain. But the other thing you can do to really add some flavor, and we want to be careful not to overwhelm the flavor of beef, because sometimes with marinades they can be so strong that you really don't know what kind of meat you're eating. So one thing you can do is use a rub. And a rub is just a combination of seasonings or spices. There are wet rubs and dry rubs. A wet rub might have mustard in it or garlic or something. A dry rub would just be dry spices. And you just rub that on the surface of the steak and probably let it sit a couple minutes, and then go ahead and grill it. So that can add some exterior flavor, which is kind of nice. It doesn't really penetrate the flavor of the beef too far. Marinades are great. Marinades are really important if you use a cut like from the chuck or from the round that are what we call less tender. And so a marinade, there are two kinds of marinades. One for flavor, and that just takes about 20 minutes that you soak the meat in. Or if you want it to tenderize, then you need to have some food acid, lemon juice, vinegar, wine, something on that order. And then it needs to soak in the marinade for about 6 hours. And that will help some tenderization. It's not going to make a fillet out of a piece of round steak, but it will do some slight tenderization and adds a great flavor.
And I guess, there are lots of places you can find the basics, and then you can kind of go with that and use your own likes and dislikes to add.
Right, and you can tweak it. If you don't like soy sauce, then leave the soy sauce out, or whatever the acid is. If you don't like wine, that's not my favorite, so I would put lemon juice in or something like that.
And another one that I see on your list is drizzles. That I think, I kind of know what that means, but it's sort of new to me in terms of a list of adding flavor to beef.
Right, and I think what that would be is probably they're calling it a drizzle, but it's probably just more of a sauce, where you, the one I have used is the balsamic syrup. So you reduce balsamic vinegar, which has a real interesting flavor when you combine that with beef. It's got a little olive oil and salt and pepper. And so that would just put a little bit of that over the steak, probably in place of Worcestershire sauce or ketchup, something
just
easy.
A little bit different.
And then
flavor.
there's some great salsas or kind of chutney or side dishes, almost what my grandma would have called a relish, that you can make and just have that there as an accompaniment. So we have lots of easy ideas and things that you can do to just make that steak that you grill just a little different.
Okay, for all of these kinds of suggestions, is this still Beef It's What's for Dinner a good site to start with?
Yeah, beefitswhatsfordinner. You know what? I think
.com.
it's .com instead
Yes.
of .org. I think it's
.com.
beefitswhatsfordinner.com. I think either one will get you there. But if you go on there, and there is a recipe search that you can just type in the ingredients, and that will show up with a lot of different options.
The one thing we haven't mentioned, Nancy, there are still cookbooks out there that have a lot of good ideas. And if a lot of people collect them, but hey, the library is a great source for
that's
cookbooks
right.
too.
So's my shelf in the basement.
Yes,
My cookbook shelf. Sometimes I think we just need to pick a cookbook and try a new recipe,
Yes.
Once a month, just to get us out of the rut and put a little spice in our life, I should say.
Well, we want to thank you very much, Nancy Degner, who's the Executive Director for the Iowa Beef Industry Council, for just kind of zeroing in and saying, hey, let's try a little something new with beef and learn a little more about beef. So thanks, Nancy.
Oh, you're welcome.
Till next time, here's a thought from Albert Einstein. Imagination is everything. It is the preview of life's coming attractions.